around 10 o'clock. It's so wonderful to be here with you. We will return to live town halls next month when the shutdown's impact is no longer going to be there. Of course, Congress is now back up and open, but we've really had a difficult 45, 50 days with the shutdown. We're pushing to deal with these healthcare premium increases, and that is one of our top priorities, to make sure that these premiums don't go up. Obviously, I'm sure some of you have heard about my work on the Epstein files, that we forced the release. We actually stood up to Donald Trump in a way that no one has been able to do in Congress. We passed something that he did not want, that he fought with tooth and nail to avoid. And we did it on behalf of the survivors, and justice for survivors against an Epstein class that has abused the law and thought the laws didn't apply. Thomas Massie and I worked very hard on this for 5 months. We had to overcome the speaker. We had to overcome the president. All the people who say fight, fight, fight. Well, no one has been able to fight Trump until now in terms of actually pushing back and winning. And we did that because of the survivors who came to the Capitol, because of the survivors who spoke out. We were able to do that. The survivors were the real heroes in this case, but we have been able to actually force Trump to bend to us. And I think it's a reminder of Article 1 of the Constitution. The Congress shouldn't be supine, that we don't have to be supplicants for Donald Trump, and that the way to fight is not necessarily to be the loudest or to have the best TikTok video or to be the most performative, that you have to do the hard work. You have to go build coalitions. You have to go in and listen to people who were MAGA voters. You have to build coalitions with people who are disaffected. And that when you build that kind of coalition, then you can show that Congress can work. Congress can be effective. Congress actually can be something that stands up to Donald Trump. And I hope what Thomas Massie and I were able to achieve with the president signing my bill tonight, it shows both the Democratic Party the way forward in standing up to this president, and the Congress the way forward in standing up for our rights. So I appreciate so much of your good wishes and help and support in the district. I wouldn't have been able to do it without so many people in the community, and I really appreciate that. What is your plan if the DOJ refuses to comply with the subpoena? Well, first of all, it's now a federal law. If they refuse to comply, they could go to jail. I'm not just talking about Pam Bondi or Donald Trump. I'm talking about career officials. It's one thing to say, okay, I don't want to fulfill Donald Trump's campaign promise. It's another thing to defy a federal law. And we now have the entire media of the country focused on this. So we will fight till we get the names of these people who abuse these young girls and until justice is served. What makes you think they won't be heavily redacted? Well, the survivors' lawyers have seen the files. So they won't be redacted in a way that is inconsistent with that. And we're also getting files from the Epstein estate. And if they are redacted, then that's tampering, and they could go to jail now that the federal law requires them to disclose these. So it's really raised the stakes, and we have independent verification of whether they're doing the right thing, because we know survivors' lawyers have seen these files, and we also have the estate that is releasing these documents. What are the risks of escalation with Venezuela's government, given the deployment of substantial U.S. Marines and forces? It's very high. I've spoken out very strongly. No war in Venezuela. We don't want another regime change war. This country keeps voting against wars. Of course, you know I've voted against the $1 trillion defense budget. I have been a consistent voice against the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. I worked with Bernie Sanders to stop the war in Yemen. And I am leading in calling for a war powers resolution so that we do not have a regime change war in Venezuela. And we can't be killing and striking ships and killing fishermen and boatsmen without knowing whether they're actually tied to the narcotics trade. What bipartisan healthcare frameworks are feasible to pass? Well, we need national health insurance in America. The healthcare system is broken. And I've obviously developed a relationship with Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm seeing if she's open to extending Medicare. Start with expanding it to 55 or 50. We need also to lower the cost of prescription drugs. Americans shouldn't pay more than people from other countries. That's Donald Trump's executive order, and Bernie Sanders and I have a bill like that. We should do both of those as a start. Data centers are rapidly expanding and using huge amounts of energy. How do you plan to ensure AI growth doesn't worsen climate change? It's a real problem. Yes, on the one hand, they're creating jobs and good electrician jobs, but AI companies should be supplying the energy. It shouldn't be driving up people's utility prices, and they should be supplying the energy with renewable energy. And I'm pushing for that. I'm pushing to have renewable energy, disclosure of water use, and making sure AI companies are doing that. How should Congress respond to China's growing influence without escalating tensions? I don't know if you saw, I was in a Codel to China, first in 6 years that Adam Smith led that I joined a bipartisan coalition. And we met with the Premier Li Qiang, we met with Wang Yi, we met with all the leaders. We need to have peaceful coexistence. We need to make sure that they realize they shouldn't take military action on Taiwan, but we need to, at the same time, not have a trade war, not have complete decoupling. And we need to be more self-sufficient when it comes to rare earth materials and have a Manhattan Project for building that here so that we're not as dependent. But having a war with China is not in anyone's interest, and having decoupling is not in everyone's interest. We need a thoughtful, rational approach. And I've been pushing for that on the China Select Committee. As a progressive, how do you bridge the gap between younger, more progressive voters, like students, and more moderate or swing district constituents to build a cohesive democratic strategy? Well, one way was to take on things like the Epstein files, where we're holding an elite class accountable that has betrayed and abandoned forgotten Americans. The other is what I call economic patriotism, to say, look, we need to generate wealth, we need to build new industry, but we also need to tax the billionaires to provide national health insurance and childcare at $10 a day and trade schools and a living wage. That we need to have an FDR coalition, one that is a Marshall Plan for America of economic development in every community, but also a commitment to economic fairness, where those who have built extraordinary wealth can pay more so that everyone can have healthcare, education, housing, and a decent shot at life. I just want for all Americans what I had, a chance at the American dream. Do you think the division between the parties can ever be solved and the Congress work as one team? That's what we showed with the Epstein files, more than simply standing up for justice, which is an important end in itself. We showed Congress can work if you're willing to see the humanity of other people, if you're willing to go beyond the caricatures, if you're willing to work for common ground. And we should be doing that not just when it comes to taking on a corrupt elite. We should be doing that when it comes to making sure people have health care and childcare, making sure that America is leading in reindustrialization, making sure that we have good paying jobs across this country, prosperity across this country, in reigniting the American dream. Why would we sell cutting edge F-35 aircraft to Saudi Arabia? It makes no sense. I'm very concerned with Trump's family ties into Saudi Arabia, where his son-in-law is getting extraordinary amounts of funding, and he's got all this cryptocurrency and AI centers. I mean, they're not to be trusted when it comes to our key national security interests, and they led the war in Yemen. They killed Khashoggi. So we need to consider human rights. How are you working to support our farmers given the struggles with tariffs and immigration rates? I helped lead on reducing the tariffs on coffee. And Trump repealed the tariff on coffee. And I helped lead on reducing tariffs on food products. And I've called for saying that we should exempt at least agricultural workers from these ICE raids and have a path to legalization. And I've tried to work with Don Bacon in a bipartisan way on these issues. How should we prepare students for the changing job market, especially in tech and AI fields? First, we need to make sure that we have a federal jobs plan, an AI New Deal, to hire young people if they're not getting jobs in the private market, in childcare or elder care, or in improving government services, or in projects, infrastructure projects in communities, or in cybersecurity or national security projects. And we need to also train people and educate people in AI so they can use the AI to help a small business and have trade schools, electricians, plumbers, beauticians. Those jobs aren't going to be automated. So we need a comprehensive jobs strategy. Is national debt a concern for you since America is spending way more than it collects? It is a concern. And if you look at my plan, just Google Khanna deficit, and you'll see I have a plan to lower the national debt by $12 trillion over the next 10 years by taxing billionaires more, by taxing stock buybacks, and by reducing the cost of Medicare Advantage, which is ripping off the American people, by eliminating fossil fuel subsidies, by making sure that we don't have duplicative programs. Will Congress rubber stamp Trump's budget, or will Congress's priorities be followed? Well, I hope that my standing up to Trump and having Trump cave here, where 70 Republicans were willing to vote against him, will give this Congress more courage, that we don't have to blindly follow Trump, that we are an independent, co-equal branch of government, and that we can take back power in our democracy. Can you speak to the risk posed by unusually high valuations of AI companies on the U.S. economy? Well, I look, they have a huge CapEx spending, but my big concern is on the job displacement. What are we going to do to make sure that jobs are not being automated? Drivers' jobs, truck drivers' jobs. We need AI to expand and enhance human capability, not to excessively eliminate jobs, which decreases productivity. And I think it's very important to have smart regulation. It's very important to have a real jobs program. And the risk for AI is that it'll continue to increase the income inequality. How can we stop cuts to HUD Section 8 that will result in evictions and homelessness? It's awful what they're doing, especially in our district where the cost of living is so high, where rent is so high. And so we need to make sure that we are pointing out that they're cutting these Section 8 vouchers. And that's an area I'm going to try to be bipartisan to fund them, because it's hurting communities across this country in red and blue districts. What's the Democratic playbook once they take the majority? Is there a Democratic Project 2029? Well, I think there should be, and it should be national health insurance, a tax on billionaires, a tax on excessive wealth, childcare at $10 a day, build 1,000 trade schools, have a living wage, make sure we eliminate PAC money from our Congress. Let's have a just foreign policy, no bombs going to Netanyahu, no foreign wars that are unnecessary. Make sure that we actually have a rent cap and build more housing. Those are the policies I think the Democrats should stand for. Is it time to start looking at universal high income since Amazon is buying 600,000 AI robots? No, I don't think it's just about universal income. I mean, yes, we should have a data dividend so people get money based on their data. We should have a stipend for child tax credit, but we need to have people work. People want to be productive. And what we need to make sure is that AI is used to enhance people's productivity, and then that they may have a shorter work week. They may be paid higher, but we need a real sense of people working if they want work in this country. Do you support raising the minimum wage? And if so, what is reasonable? Well, I do support it. In California, in some places, we have $25 for healthcare workers and fast food workers. And nationally, I'm on Bernie Sanders' bill to get to $17. What can be done to help families struggling with the rising cost of childcare? Please look at my bill, Khanna childcare, $10 a day. $10 a day for childcare, people making $25 an hour, and they will cost about $80 billion. Every family would have childcare. Are there plans to hold the administration accountable if the DOJ cites national security to withhold documents? Yes, that's a very narrow exception. They have to register in the Federal Register. They have to actually show a judge that it's national security. And the president could do that without the bill. They could just declare anything national security, but it would be an abuse if the courts found that there was a violation of the power. And so I'm confident we'll still get documents out. How can the federal government support small businesses struggling with inflation, labor shortages, and supply chain issues? First, get rid of some of these tariffs that are killing small business. Second, make sure we're providing financing for these small businesses that need bridge financing before they go under. Third, let's have trade schools and training academies to help people with jobs. Not every job needs a college degree, but we need to have collaborative community college and training for people to work, to build their workforce. How do you propose U.S. balance clean energy innovation with protecting communities vulnerable to climate disasters? Well, we need to push for clean energy, but we also need to push for my Green New Deal of Health, which says that communities need healthcare centers and where there's a climate catastrophe. And we need to provide funding for FEMA and resilience where there are storms. So those are two things that we should be doing. Data centers are expanding and using huge amounts of energy. How do you think AI strains climate change? Well, we need renewable energy for that. Solar, wind, geothermal. And we need AI to be funding that renewable energy so that it's not putting more stress on our carbon emissions or on local electricity prices. Can you give a current picture of the government funding for NIH and CDC research? Have those funds been returned? Those funds have been cut. Those NIH is at a very low level. They're firing people. It's one of the big things. I mean, even though there's the funds, they're not all being allocated, and the administration isn't spending them. And so there's cuts to NIH funding, even despite the allocation. How are you participating in the establishment of guardrails for the use of AI? Well, I'm working on an AI Bill of Rights to make sure that people really understand AI, to make sure that human beings are involved, not machines, in making decisions, to make sure that people's data is protected, to make sure that we are having jobs and protected and not just excessive automation and mass layoffs, to make sure that algorithms can't have junk going into everyone and targeting everyone. So we need to really have thoughtful, smart regulations with AI. What steps are you taking to ensure Silicon Valley innovation benefits the broader economy and not just tech investors? Well, I have been calling for a wealth tax. I've been saying we need childcare, we need healthcare, universal healthcare. I've been saying we need to be creating these jobs across the country and not just for Silicon Valley and technology and AI. I've been saying we need to make sure that workers have a fair share in all of this, and that they are gaining an ownership stake through stock or a share in the profits. What policies do you support to make higher education and vocational training more accessible? I'm for free public college. I'm for free community college. And I'm for creating 1,000 new trade schools and free trade schools in America. We can't pay for it. Our district is worth $18 trillion. Apple, Google, NVIDIA, and Broadcom, Tesla. We can pay for universal education in this country. We can pay for universal childcare in this country. We need to make sure that the wealth and the profits aren't just going to the billionaires, who's grown from 3 trillion to 8 trillion, more wealth than half the country combined, double the wealth than more than half the country combined. We need to invest in people. What are your concrete proposals for renewing the Democratic Party so it's more responsive to populist energy? That's what we did in taking on the Epstein class. That's what I did in calling for Schumer to step aside. That's what I did in saying we can't have money in politics and need to ban super PACs. That's what I did in calling for national health insurance and calling for $10 a day childcare and calling for a living wage and saying we shouldn't be going to foreign wars and saying that our priority has to be rebuilding the working and middle class, rebuilding forgotten Americans at a time where a system hasn't worked for them. Do you support reinstituting or expanding subsidized student loans so interest doesn't accrue while students are there? Yes, I do. I took out student loans. I know how difficult that is, and I think we need to work on a plan that at least interest doesn't accrue or forgive some of that. Will you vote to end H-1B, record STEM unemployment right now? 80% of them go to entry-level workers from India. It needs to be reformed. We should not be having them for positions that are low skilled. We should not be having them for positions that are undercutting the market. So I have a bill with Bill Pascal, you can Google it, to reform the abuses of the H-1B system. Given the restructuring of the Department of Education, how do you see that affecting student services, loan forgiveness, or oversight student aid? It's making it much harder. I mean, those programs still exist, but the administration is harder, so less students can get those resources. I mean, if you're from a family in Fremont or Cupertino, maybe it's fine. But if you're from El Viso or East San Jose or Newark and you don't have a family member who's gone to college, then it becomes much harder. So the burden is much more on students, and it's going to hurt low-income communities and disadvantaged communities. Have you considered MTG under No Tax on Home Sales Act? It would help make housing more affordable. I'm happy to look at it. I have not. I'll talk to her about it. The war in Gaza has eased up. a war mostly against civilians funded by our own dollars, yet the suffering of the Palestinian people is still going on. What do we need to do? I led the letter to call for a recognition of a Palestinian state and follow 153 other countries. We need to be for the self-determination of the Palestinian people and the self-determination of the Jewish people. Secure Israel is a Jewish democratic state standing side by side with a secure Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza. Do you think the U.S. is funding advanced battery technology enough to compete with China in renewable technology? No, we're not. President Biden did. Now we're falling behind. President Trump is cutting a lot of that. We need to rebuild our investments in electric vehicles and batteries. I'm interested in getting involved in local politics. What advice do you have for young people who want to influence policy on climate, on debt, on foreign policy? My advice is start being active, be passionate. The country needs you. Please get involved in a commission in your city, get involved in going to a school board meeting. That's how I started. I used to go to school board meetings growing up in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. When they were cutting band, when they were cutting special education programs, I went to my school board meetings and spoke up. Go work on a campaign or intern. We have had so many interns from the district come into DC or work at our extraordinary district staff and case staff. Work on that. And but we'd love to, we need young people. It's time for a new generation in this country to lead, to get into office, to show us the way forward. And I'm really appreciative that you're already taking that step with being on this town hall. What can Congress do to lower prescription drug costs? We should have Medicare negotiate, and we should have a law, which Bernie Sanders and I proposed, that companies shouldn't be able to charge Americans more than they charge people in Britain and France and Japan. And how is that fair? And if they do that, they should lose their patent. We need to lower prescription drug companies. How's Russia going to be stopped? I still support arming Ukraine. I've consistently voted for that. Russia engaged in a war of territorial aggression, and I'm not for appeasement of Putin. I don't think we can just abandon the Ukrainians. We need to continue to support them. I continue to support that aid. What can others do about social media that is stopping the posting of real pictures of what's happening in Gaza? I've always been against censorship, whether it's censorship of the left or the right. I'm a big advocate of free speech, and I'll continue to be, and I'll continue to make that case to these platforms. What involvement is there for the House in the peace proposal presented to Ukraine by our administration today? Well, we need to make sure that we don't abandon Ukraine, that we continue to make it clear to Ukraine that they get to decide, and that Russia is the provocative country, and that Russia is engaged in an illegal invasion, and that we're not going to just abandon Ukraine the way J.D. Vance wanted to do. We're not going to do that. We're going to continue to support the Ukrainian people. Can a bill be introduced to move elections from private funding to government funding in a process created? Yes, I've called for banning super PACs. Our bill on democracy dollars would allow funding for citizens to be funding elections. The amount of money in our elections is horrific. It's one of the big reasons that our democracy is corrupted. Since you need to believe there needs to be a national health care, Medicare for all, will you partner with Senator Sanders to force the issue with Republicans and submit the bill until it passes? I co-chaired Bernie's campaign. I'm happy to push that, and Senator Sanders is pushing that. I want to work in the House with Marjorie Taylor Greene and others who recognize that the private health insurance system is broken. From a work perspective, how do you plan to prepare students for an AI-driven economy, both in terms of job displacement and creating new opportunities? We need tech academies, AI academies, so people learn how to use AI to be an electrician, a plumber, a small business owner, how they can apply AI to a small business or a business and make it better. We need to make sure also that we have a future workforce administration that hires young people who are struggling as entry-level jobs get eliminated, so that they can develop their skills and serve their community or serve the country while doing so. You've expressed concern over a potential restatement of Schedule F, which could make it easier to fire federal employees. What concrete actions are you taking to protect civil servants? Well, I've met with a lot of the federal civil servants in our district, and NASA Ames and others who were affected, and federal healthcare workers and Head Start workers. And I spoke out very strongly and subpoenaed Elon Musk and said that we cannot just watch the dismantling of our government. And I'll continue to speak out, and we're pushing, hopefully once we have Congress, to hold accountable people who are violating the law. What are you doing to restore the full SALT deduction and to roll back Trump's tax hikes on Californians? I'm on the bills to do that. Unfortunately, they didn't do that. And it's going to mean taking back the Congress to be able to do it. Trump's tax breaks didn't restore a small portion of it, but not to the level it needed to. Many students in the Bay Area are deeply concerned about student debt, with the parts of federal student aid eligibility being limited to recent budgets. What is your plan to support low-income students? I feel that. I took out over $100,000 in student debt. It's a huge burden, but I'm fighting to both make college free, and also to have student debt forgiveness up to $50,000 for working class families. I think people should not start out with so much debt that they can't buy a house, that they can't have economic sufficiency. You're the only person I've heard talking about progressive capitalism, and that sounds like very opposing views. How does it work? Well, I've written a whole book on it, moral capitalism, not just me, but Joseph Stiglitz, who won the Nobel Prize, which basically says we need free enterprise and innovation to build wealth, to build companies, to have innovation. But it needs to be a moral capitalism. It needs to be one which has healthcare and childcare, and everyone has education. And it needs to be one where we care about community and place. And you can't just watch communities hollowed out for the sake of the free market. So it's a moral capitalism. It's a capitalism that works for people. How much APEC money have you taken? None. I don't take PAC and Supermac money, and I don't take APEC money. Oh, look, one last question. Anything on ICE violations and updates for non-citizens? Well, Jasmine Crockett and I did the bill on the ICE code of conduct. ICE agents need to have clear, visible marking. They can't have masks. They have to have a body camera. They should be overseen by justice, not by Homeland Security. There shouldn't be massive violations of their rights. We need to hold that accountable so that we can not see the brutal things that we're seeing in our communities. And I have my team, Simone, Yvonne, Tom Pike, others are very, very aware of this. And we are very on top of making sure people's constitutional rights are protected. I'm glad our community stood up against these ICE raids that were happening unconstitutionally, and that Trump ultimately pulled back from what he was going to do. Again, we need to stand up at this moment in our country's history. I appreciate very much what our conversation is. I wanted to go and answer as many questions in the half hour. It's been a very, very busy week with the Epstein files, and I have been going nonstop, but I always consider my commitment to our community and these town halls as the most important. We have done a town hall every month since I've been elected in 9 years, and I'm very, very proud of that. And I'm really proud of the district I represent. And today is a victory for all of us, for our district, as we stood up to Donald Trump, as we stood up for survivors, as we forced him to cave to Congress, as we stood up for our constitutional democracy. This was a collective achievement by our district, by California 17. And I hope we can all be proud of this. And of course, the work continues to figure out how we heal the divides in our country, how we stand up to this lawless president, how we make Congress a co-equal branch of government again, and how we make sure that people who are forgotten Americans are actually given a chance at the American dream, and that we don't just have all the wealth and power skewed to an Epstein class that has abused the rules and that has really shafted ordinary Americans. Thank you so much for your leadership and your conversation. I'm looking forward to seeing everyone either around during the Thanksgiving weekend and in December at an in-person town hall. I appreciate all of you.